IPTV, we got the top American promoter, Lou DiBella. He shows in New York, Broadway boxing, the best there are. What we call small hall shows, I guess, in the UK. They're brilliant. Lou does so much for boxing, been about it, this industry for longer than he cares to remember, forgotten more than what people know. But Lou, how's it gone for you in a lockdown with no boxing business, and even worse for you, no baseball, no Montgomery Biscuits even?
No, the Montgomery Biscuits were shut down. We still have some staff. We're reaching out to the community. I think the kids need to know that their local baseball team's still around, even though we're not playing. So, we have people working, but it's really frustrating, Steve. I got 3 businesses basically closed down. I'm able to place fighters on people's shows. I've been around a long time, 30 years in boxing now. My Hall of Fame induction got canceled, but so was life. You got to be philosophical. There are people worse off than we are, but I got to be honest. I'm tired of Groundhog's Day, and I can't do my local shows. I'm probably the preeminent promoter in the tri-state area, New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, and I'm pretty much completely shut down. And there's no reason to think that's going to change in the next 6 months or so. So it's very frustrating. I've been able to keep a number of my fighters active. I'm doing my best to keep as many of them as I can active. Luckily, I think most of them are understanding, and they're grown-ass people. They're adults, and they get it. They understand that there's not much I can do, and I'm doing the best I can. But it is frustrating. And I don't have a bubble. I don't have a exclusive deal with a streaming service or an exclusive deal with a network. And I don't have a partnership where my partner is so desperate for programming that they'll subsidize, shows in an empty bubble. And those bubbles are expensive. You got to do COVID testing. You have to separate people. I think our regulations here right now for conducting boxing in the proper manner are even more stringent and expensive than they are in the UK, partially because we're such a shit show here right now.
It's not too great here, but I see the American news all the time, and it's wild stuff. But in your business, have you had to take the nasty decisions and lay off people from any of your businesses at all?
Yes, I had. I have. I have, particularly in the baseball teams, over 50% of my employees have been laid off or furloughed. In my boxing business, the majority of my employees are working part-time, a couple of days a week. They're on a partial furlough. When I can't do a show, there's not a full week's worth of work for everybody. So, I've been taking advantage of some of the government loans and programs that are out here to help businesses that are closed down. But look, boxing's one of the last sports that's going to come back to regularity. That's just, it's one of the last areas that's going to come back to regularity, because we require a lot. We're very heavily regulated. Medicals and all sorts of things have to go through the state governments. Obviously, we're about selling tickets, and that's a big part, particularly the whole business of club shows, which obviously I'm heavily invested in. Women's boxing also, which heavily are club shows, because the women in the United States don't really have a platform. Michaela Mayer gets televised by ESPN, but even right now, Clarissa Shields doesn't have a fight scheduled. And the majority of women in America aren't fighting. Eddie's getting a lot of credit for doing a lot of women's stuff right now in the UK. I think that's great for the ladies over in Europe and over there. I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that right now everybody's cost conscious. I don't think the women are getting a lift now that's suggestive of a real dedication or commitment to building women's boxing. I think they're getting the attention now because they're inexpensive, and we're in expensive times, and getting a world title fight for a woman, unfortunately for the women, costs what a fight costs for a prospect. It's not even like, there's no correlation between what the men and women make. But I guess the point I'm making is it's difficult for everybody right now. I'm just trying to adjust myself to these times.
And it also goes back, a quote I've read from you often is, you always tell a lot of your fighters to have a job or a second career, don't you, as well? This sort of
Yeah, but I do that. You know, it's interesting, Steve. I've been doing that since I got. I mean, I'm now 20 years in the promotional side of things, in boxing, and literally from the first fighters I ever signed, even the ones that were bonus babies were guys that were likely to become world champions to the extent that we could ever predict. I've always taken that position. You know, get an education, you know, get a job. If you have a trade, continue to do it if you can, and balance it with your boxing career, because people got to understand that people think they hear about the fighters that are constantly mentioned on social media and the guys you see repetitively on television. The truth of the matter is, it's a tiny percentage of televised fighters who become financially secure, and it's a very small percentage of fighters that become wealthy. 99 and change percent of fighters are fighting just to get by. And probably, unfortunately, a majority of fighters in the world, a majority, over 50%, are probably making in that poverty level, like, you know, not much more than their basic needs, if they're even making that. So, yeah, I do encourage fighters and look, boxing, your timeline is short. The continuum of your career is not long, unless you overstay your welcome. And we just saw Danny Williams last weekend. You know, unless you overstay your welcome, your career is not going to take you into your 40s. And most boxing careers don't go into the fighters' late 30s. The majority of fighters are out of the game within 4 or 5 years of turning pro.
And also, I think maybe that the real superstar fighters who are on this mad money, a lot of them don't hang around like they used to for 12, 13 years, because they're getting such mad money when they're at the moment, some of these guys who are at the A-star fighters.
No, true. But also, you know, I read online and people say, well, there's no pensions, there's no unions. And what they don't understand is unions are about shared interest of employees. Here's the problem in boxing. Who's the employer? There's no central league or structure. So it's all fractured all over the place. And the money is not the promoter. The money is the streaming service or the network. And Floyd Mayweather or Tyson Fury don't have the same economic interests as the fighter that's an opponent on Sky or an opponent on a PBC show who's making 25 or 30 grand. And the fighters that are rolling in dough aren't looking to subsidize the fighters that aren't making anything. Doesn't mean they're bad people, but it's just there's 99% of the fighters not being treated appropriately, who can't afford medical care, who aren't making a living, and 1% who are getting rich. That 1% aren't seeking to unionize so that they can support the other 99. So, you know, that's why this is, you know, people say it's an unforgiving business, and boxing is a difficult and unforgiving business.
How long do you see in your mind before boxing gets back to as we know it, where we've got these big shows, we've got some of your big shows, we've got your great shows on Broadway where all the Puerto Ricans come down from the Bronx and drink beer at ringside and buy tickets to cheer on their friends? How long before you think we've got it back as me and you might know boxing?
I'm hoping for the second quarter of next year, sometime spring, early summer. I mean, it's horrible to think that because it's so long away, you know, a period of time away. But there's very little reason, at least here in the domestic U.S., to think that there's going to be huge changes prior to that. I got to be honest too. If I would not, you know, there are states that are allowing shows without real testing or safeguards. I'm not going to operate that way. It just doesn't jive with my moral compass. So until I can do a show in a manner that I'm completely confident is appropriate and safe, listening to the experts, I'm not going to do one. And unfortunately, I don't have a DAZN deal or or an ESPN exclusive contract, and I can't create my little bubble. I need my bubble to buy tickets in order to support a small show. It's funny. You go on social media and there are so many experts, particularly in boxing right now, Steve. I remember years ago when you and I, like when I first got into this business, I met you probably 20 years plus. It's been a long time since we know each other. What? Yeah.
Minutes to HBO around that time.
Yeah, right. But it was a different world then, and we had giants as sports writers and boxing writers, and now so much of what we read and see in boxing is social media content and fanboys making believe they're journalists. And I'm reading all this stuff. Well, they don't know how to handle COVID over there. They should come over. No, it's not about handling COVID. It's being in an environment and responding to the laws around you and the realities of what's going on around you. I would love to do a show right now. I'm dying to do a show. I want to bring my employees back. I'm dying to see a baseball game. I'm dying to see our season ticket holders and our fans. I'm believe me, if I try to keep myself occupied and I'm working really, really hard, but I'm working, but I'm really not getting very much ahead because so much is out of my control. But guess what? That's true of all of us right now. I think so many people right now aren't living their usual lives. Pretty much none of us are living the lives we're really accustomed to. So you got to be a little bit philosophical about it. There are people that have it a lot worse than I do.
One thing the pandemic may or may not have sparked is this Canelo, Golden Boy, the zone bust up. How do you see that playing out in the coming months, year?
It was inevitable that this go to court. It was inevitable. I think it was inevitable because I think the relationship between Canelo and Golden Boy is fractured. I also think it's inevitable because it appears that the rights that the zone believes that they received for Canelo don't match up with Canelo's contract with his promoter. So there is definitely major areas of dispute. So it doesn't shock me. And you know what? When a working relationship is publicly as strained as the Canelo working relationship with Golden Boy has been, you're going to have problems. And also from a DAZN perspective, where a company goes out there and brags about how much money they're going to spend. And they had Eddie beating his chest. I'm going to take over American boxing. I have $100 million in the first year. We're going to spend $1 billion. Well, when you lose $1 billion, it's going to affect your business. And when you're unable to take over with a huge expenditure, you're going to change your business plan and model. People can say what they will about DAZN, but the guy in the Ukraine didn't become a gazillionaire, a multi-billionaire by flushing billions down a toilet bowl.
Yeah,
and the people and the executives running DAZN didn't get their jobs because they're stupid people. So you had to assume after a period of excessive spending, they were going to analyze their results and determine if it still made sense to operate in exactly the same way. I don't agree with all these people predicting DAZN's disappearance. I don't agree with that. I think DAZN they have a big investment. Len Blavatnik's, his history doesn't suggest he's the kind of guy who walks away from things or quits. But I think that it's going to become a much more globally centric business. I think it's clear to me that the United States is going to be somewhat de-emphasized, and that Europe and the rest of the world and the areas particularly where DAZN's been very, very strong, like, Germany, Italy, Spain, Japan, you're going to see them try to accentuate their strengths and build up the areas which they're strong. Clearly, they're going to. Eddie's a partner of theirs. My understanding is Eddie's contract with Sky runs out in 2021 from stuff I've read.
I don't know. That's the suggestion.
Well, I don't know either. I know what I've read. That's all I know. But just as an observer, it appears to me that DAZN's in a period of readjustment. But I got to be honest, Steve, the whole sport of boxing is in a period of readjustment. And we were going to be in that period with or without the pandemic. It's not the pandemic that's alone that's resulting in an effort to drive down purses for fighters whose pay may not have been equivalent to their marketability. And you're seeing now attempts, I'm seeing them very, very clearly over here. I'm not that aware of what Eddie's paying the fighters in the UK, but what I'm seeing, well, I'm seeing him emphasizing a lot, doing a lot more women's stuff. And I do know that women's boxing is extraordinarily inexpensive. Yeah. You know, I watch what's going on here right now and the offers I'm getting for my fighters, and the offers I'm getting for my fighters are a fraction of what they would have been before the pandemic. But like I said, I don't think it totally relates to the pandemic. I think we were literally at the precipice of a major recalculation and a major readjustment in boxing. And I think what the pandemic did was bring that sooner. We were heading toward a readjustment, but the pandemic forced it immediately. But I don't think, you asked earlier, when are we going to get back to exactly what we were used to? Maybe even longer than the pandemic lasts. Because let's face realities. We have multiple avenues, like right now, Eddie is attached with the Sky and to the Zone. PBC has deals with Fox and Showtime. Aram has exclusivity at ESPN. Okay? And over the last 5 years, when all this money's been spent, the quality of the major fights hasn't gotten better. It's gotten worse. Why has it gotten worse? Because there are 3 exclusive avenues, and it's not that simple to cross over from one to the other. So there's actually huge impediments to the biggest and best fights. And then add to it now the economic stress created by a pandemic, and then add to that a readjustment necessitated by the fact that the incredible spending over the last 3-4 years has not resulted in bang for the buck. A lot of money's been spent, but the results haven't justified the expense. And whenever that happens in any business, whether it's a manufacturing business or an entertainment business or any business, there's going to be a market change.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there was, I don't know, it was a market change, I don't know what I'd call it. This bizarre purse bid that went on between Lee Selby and your fighter, George Kambosos Jr., with Eddie and yourself.
Yeah, but I didn't want to get into that, but that really pissed me off, if you want to know the truth, Steve, because I made a deal with Eddie. We had a package agreed upon. The fight was scheduled. Eddie rescheduled it, and then rescheduled it again for October 3rd. And then, like, basically, after a deal was complete, said, no, we need to go to purse bid because I can't do this event on October 3rd. And I went to purse bid, and I said to Eddie, why are we going to purse bid? Because I am telling you right now, I'm a man of my word, I am going to bid more. I am going to bid an amount that is going to result in me getting more than I would have gotten by our negotiated deal. I'm going to bid. And if I win the bid, I'm going to do it in Australia. So why are we going to bid? I didn't really get an answer. And then we went to bid, and I did exactly what I told Eddie I was going to do. Because the 150 I was getting, George Kambosos was entitled to 60%. Lee was entitled to 40%. So the purse bid was 150, 100. Okay? Yeah. So I bid 260, which was more than the 150 on my 60% end. And then Eddie bid 277. So by going to purse bid, I'm getting a bigger package than I was getting before. And then in the last few days, I got notified by Eddie that he wants to do the fight on October 3rd again, in 2 weeks.
Possible, yeah.
Which I don't believe is going to happen, by the way, because it's not practicable. There's quarantine requirements. The kid's still in Australia. Eddie went public and said he was doing the fight in November and December. Eddie and I, we jostle a lot. We jab at each other a lot. I know Eddie since he's a kid, but some of this stuff now just appears to me to be a bit of fuckery, and I don't like it. I mean, we're in rough times. Let's just be straight with one another. You know, he's I got to be honest, he's frustrating me a lot lately.
And one final thing before we let you go, you forwarded us your time fantastically this morning from New York. 12 months' time, who will be the one heavyweight standing as the champion? Or as the number one heavyweight?
You know, I'm unabashedly a big Tyson Fury fan right now. I mean, I like him personally. I think he's an interesting, fascinating guy. I think his heart is good. You know, I think he's got a great story of redemption and comeback. But his skills are uncanny for a man his size. His boxing ability is tremendous. And he also showed in that last Deontay Wilder fight that he can hurt you. You know, he's a huge man, and he has the power of a huge man. I think Tyson Fury is going to be very, very difficult to beat. I don't, you know, I think that the Deontay Wilder third fight will be a more competitive fight than the last one. I don't think you saw the best of Wilder, but at the moment, until proven otherwise, Fury's superior to Wilder. And I don't think AJ matches up very well with Fury. I mean, if AJ fought Fury, I'll make a nice wager. You know, I'll contact William Hill or somebody, and I'll make a nice wager because I clearly fancy Fury in that fight.
Lou, thanks very much for your time today. It's very much appreciated, and let's hope we see you very soon over here and having you your back.
I got to tell you something. During this pandemic, I've spent more time talking to people across the pond than I have people over here. And by the way, like, I really do appreciate UK boxing fans. I think, you know, you have a core, you know, right now in the United States, we're much more of a niche sport. But in the UK, there are an awful lot of people that know boxing and appreciate it. And it's great to see that. And I'm hoping that somehow we can make changes to our sport that allow it to rise in the U.S. to a place where it is in the UK, because we're no longer over here the sport of kings. We're much more a niche sport, and it's unfortunate because I think at our best, our sport is superior and more dramatic and more theatrical and more poetic, and you know, than anything out there. But I don't think we've been at our best as a sport in recent years, and I think we got to do better. The judging has to be better. The matches have to be better. The fans have to get the fights they want. We have to work together more. I saw Eddie and Frank threatening to work together, but I haven't seen shit since. You know, they had that little thing. We had a phone call, but I don't see any results of it. And particularly, you would think during a pandemic, when travel is much more difficult, that these guys would get it together and do some things interesting in the UK. You know, between themselves. But, you know, right now, like I said, we're not working together the way we need to. We need to make changes globally to bring our sport to where it should be. It's even worse in the US. But great talking to you, Steve. Great. I'll leave you on that ever optimistic note. And I hope to talk to you soon.
You take care. Thank you.
Take care.
For all boxing info, news and latest interviews, amateur and pro, across the north, click and subscribe. VIP Boxing Promotions. Also Twitter, Instagram and Facebook.